When Arthur asked me to talk about an ethical question, I realized that I've been making decisions based on ethics and morality probably my entire life. Maybe we all do. But I got a bachelor's degree in peace studies. I've marched on Washington. I've been in numerous protests. I've worked for a dozen nonprofits, and I've been involved in political campaigns. And that's just what I do for a living sometimes, or just how I got my schooling. The truth is, I make decisions every day on a really small basis. So, for example, I don't eat at Chick-fil-A because the owner is a homophobe. I don't eat calamari because I don't like to eat something that might be sentient, might be aware of its own self. And there have been studies done on octopuses where one of the things that's really fascinating about octopuses is they can get through very, very small holes. They don't have any bones or anything, and so they can squeeze through and fit through very tiny spots. But they can't squeeze through all of them. They do have a certain mass that they can't get smaller than. And when these scientists were checking to see whether it could get through this hole or that hole, they wanted to watch how it behaved. How did it know that it could get through one hole or another? Did it feel it out first? And it didn't. It didn't feel first. It doesn't go and check out the hole first to see if it can fit through. It seems to, I mean, it does maybe check it out to see it, but it doesn't sort of make some kind of, calculation. Well, let me feel that, and then let me feel my body and see if it's big enough. It can feel around with its sensations, and it just knows how big it is. It's aware of its own physicality in a way that most animals, we assume at least, most animals are not. And once I heard that, once I saw that, I could no longer eat anything that is from octopus because, these animals are quite brilliant. They may be sentient. Really, the only reason they haven't overtaken the ocean is that they have a very small lifespan. So they've even shown that these octopuses can teach each other complex tricks, but again, they have to be able to do that in only a few short years before they're gone. So it's not a lot to build sort of a society around, even if you are the smartest thing in the ocean. Continue on. So with some of these decisions that I make every day, I won't plant certain species because they're non-native and have a tendency to be invasive. I go so far as to, we have a pool in our backyard, and I go as far to, whenever I see a bug, a bee especially, but even any bug that has fallen in the water and is, trying to survive it and spinning its wheels there, I feel bad, and I go and get the net and get them out as though I'm some great bug lifeguard. I've also spent most of my adult career involved in, like I said, working for nonprofits. For a while, I was a park ranger, and I've also been in journalism, very much as an advocacy journalist in the gay and lesbian, transgender, and bisexual community. And really, I've seen what I do there as activism. When I first started working at Girlfriends Magazine, which is a lesbian magazine that I co-founded with my partner and a couple of friends, it was still before the internet had really taken off. We were still mailing out magazines to people who were in remote areas of the United States who were, sort of alone as lesbians. They maybe knew a couple of people, but they really did not feel like they had a community to be a part of. And in that environment, it seems so, critical to our community, critical to our social survival, to receive magazines, to get information about the rest of the community, to have some way to know that other lesbians and other people were out there that you could identify with. Like I said, I helped found a lesbian magazine, but now I'm a guy. I might not sound like it because I know I've got a high voice still. I transitioned, and really late in life, actually. I mean, it seemed like to me, I guess. There may be some people transitioning much later, but I transitioned when I was 38. And I've actually been with my partner since we were both 22. So we had been in a lesbian relationship for a very long time before I came out as trans and transitioned to male. And that's what I'm coming to in this story about all of my decisions that have been based on ethics and morality, and because I think that a lot of people, at least externally, feel like that decision, the decision to transition, was probably the most unethical or immoral thing that I've done. Because for a lot of people, they almost see it as maybe an affront to God. I am just a mere mortal, and yet I'm here making a decision that somehow I was born in the wrong body, that I wasn't meant to be who I am. Hmm. That's not really how I feel, though, because I actually appreciate what I've been through. I really believe that by being seen as female for so long, that I got to see the world in a way that most men never do. I got to see the world through not exactly the eyes of a woman, because I don't think I really was that, but certainly the eyes of someone perceived as female. And it's a really different world than a lot of guys might know, or there's a very female sort of underground society almost, where women together say things and do things and are involved in stuff that they might never do or say or be involved with in front of someone of the opposite sex. I think some of that's changing now. We have sort of more integration of the sexes, as you will, as people, the younger generations are coming up. You have just more gender fluidity, I think. But still, back to this idea that for some people at least, I was born in a body. They're feeling God gave me that body for a reason, not my place to change it. And yet I did. And truly, it was a hard decision to go through surgery, because I actually have always been a person who believed that you don't do, elective cosmetic surgeries, that's not really proper even. My little sister has Down syndrome, and I remember when my parents were considering doing a surgery to make it so her eyes didn't appear, the way that they do, because that's very characteristic of Down syndrome. And so if you were to say change that, then maybe people wouldn't automatically see you and see you as Downs. And I was really offended by that. I was offended that they would change my little sister's face, change how she looked, just because of these other things, these sort of external pressures, or, the way that people perceive someone. With my little sister, she didn't have that surgery, and she she kind of is perceived very quickly as different, even if you didn't know she was Down. So it's not like you could not have seen that. So it's sort of a crazy thing to have even thought of to do. But again, I had this objection to what people see as cosmetic surgery. So to then choose to remove my breasts, for example, it was a hard decision, and it was made particularly harder because several of my friends during that exact period of time were struggling through issues with breast cancer. So they were having to consider losing their breasts in order to save their lives, but absolutely mortified by that and not in any way happy with that choice or what it would mean for them. And on the other side, there I was, like, wanting to get rid of these, wanting to, have the chest that I felt like I needed to have, and yet my tissue was completely healthy. And, it made me aware both of how much something that you have other people can wish they had. Other people, there's always someone out there, no matter how bad you think you've got it, there's someone out there who wishes they had what you have. But let's go back to the idea of transition. Sorry about that. So I was talking about the morality of my decision to transition from female to male. And I have been talking about my body and the morality of making a decision to alter it. And that has certainly been, a question and been a struggle of whether that is right or not. Certainly, where I've come to, of course, is that it is the right thing to do. I think you kind of have to come to that, or you wouldn't continue down the path. But that's because I've really come to see how important it is to be externally who you feel like you are internally. Of course, in some ways, there's parts of ourselves that will never get seen, and there's some, people who will never see us for who we feel like we are, especially because as humans we often, make snap decisions about who somebody is based on about, 10 seconds of first meeting them. So there will always be a mismatch between who you feel like you are and who everybody else sees you as. But this incongruence that happens for transgender people, what we call body dysmorphism, when you see your body and are very disturbed by the fact that it doesn't fit how you imagine it's supposed to be. It's very difficult. It's very confusing, very depressing sometimes. It's part of why it took me so long to really come to grips with that and admit that I was trans rather than something else. I remember one time realizing that when I would catch an image of myself on the side of my eye, say like when I'm passing a mirror or the car windows of, along the street, that I would see this female person there and be sort of surprised by it. That was an often, sort of a frequent feeling that I had about my body, like that I was constantly being surprised by its femaleness, even though, like I said, I was 38. I'd been in a female body for, almost 4 decades at that point. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to me in any way, and yet some part of my subconscious, some part of my psyche, didn't feel like that body matched who I was. So that is, one of the biggest reasons that that transitioning and making body modifications is so important, because it connects those two things suddenly, where you can see yourself, and primarily you are the person you want to be. I say primarily because basically there are limits to science and to surgery and what you can do with the body that you have, which is why so many trans people support starting at an earlier age, because once you've gone through the changes of adolescence, going from adolescence to teenage years, that really impacts your body, especially if you're in a perceived male body. Testosterone makes dramatic changes to your body that are sort of irreversible, and so for trans women especially, not having that to later have to come back in and try to reverse or try to engineer around it, that's really important. Okay. And I know I'm sort of rambling and a little off topic with some of this, but we go back to the beginning, because I think there was, there were people who questioned the morality of changing my body because of it being a body that I'd been given by God and man and, my parents and everything else. But even more so, people were very upset with me that I was, quote, doing this to my wife, Diane. I'm very sorry about that. There's some barking going on, and that's what it means to have 3 little rats who are just too spoiled to be in opposite rooms. My transition was very much a joint transition between me and my wife. We write about this in our memoir, Queerly Beloved, because she actually understood what was going on for me before I understood it. I talked to her before I made different steps in my transition, so it was never just me blindly going forth without her support. But other people really felt that it was unethical to have been in this relationship for more than a decade and then ask my partner to continue to be there and witness me undergo a dramatic alteration of who I was, and have any expectation that she would still continue to be with me after I made such a dramatic change. That was particularly upsetting to many of the women in my life, my mother and my aunts. They were very adamant that this was not what I should be doing to someone I loved, and that it wasn't fair of me and it wasn't right. At this point, that you can't, you sort of can't do that if you're in this relationship. And it wasn't that I, just, threw things to the wind and didn't matter to me that Diane stayed with me. It mattered to me more than anything. I would have not gone forward if she had, asked me to stop, or she, in fact, encouraged me to continue is more the way, because I had, said at first, at the very beginning, I wasn't sure that just knowing who I was, just finally having an answer to why I felt so different and unsettled with my body and out of place, just knowing that, having the answer to that riddle for at least the beginning, it seemed like that might be enough. Like maybe I wouldn't even need to go any further. Maybe I would never need to go, through hormones or surgery or anything else. But my wife encouraged me. She really felt like once I, made a statement that this is who I was, that, we had to, there was no other choice for her. For her, she felt like it, the other thing, opposite would be unjust, unethical to ask me not to embrace myself, who I thought I really was, in order to stay with her, in order to have our lives the way they were. That would have been the unethical answer. But, it was a huge risk, transition, not just risking my relationship, because, at the time, every documentary, movie, or TV show, or book that we read with a couple, started out, there was this couple and, one of them comes out as trans and they decide to go through transition and they are saying they're going to stay together and there's not a problem. And then cut to the end and there's the trans person alone at the end. And, even though they say they didn't break up over the transition, it just keeps playing itself out that the trans person ends up alone. So I was very much concerned about that it would, ruin what we had. But also in other ways too, like my wife, at the time she was editing the nation's largest lesbian publication. So, well, what was going to change with that if she was suddenly with a male partner instead of a female partner? How was that going to change? What was going to happen? Would she lose her job? So she talked to her publisher almost immediately and said, like, do I need to resign, or do you want me to stay in the closet about this? What would you want? And she said, no, of course not. I wouldn't ask you to do either of those things. I think you're the most qualified person to run this magazine, and that doesn't change depending on who your partner is. That was one of those things that was really very important to us to reiterate numerous times in this transition, is that my changes do not have to necessitate her changing. If she still wants to identify as a lesbian, which she did for many years after my transition, that is absolutely her right, because no one should be able to dictate what someone else's identity is, especially what their sexual identity or gender identity is. So it didn't matter to me that I had transitioned and I was now a man and she was legally married to me. If she still felt like she was a lesbian, I completely support that and support her ability to define herself in any way that she wants to. Other people externally sometimes see us and think that once I've made those changes, she either has to change or it's, somehow not authentic. I have a piece I wrote about because another trans man had written this large piece online about how he could never be with someone who called themselves a lesbian because clearly that person didn't see them as a real man. And I think that's bunk, and I think there are many ways that I know that my wife sees me as a real man, and some of those are sort of these funny and ridiculous things, like she worries about me coming down with a prostate cancer and has actually stopped and been very concerned and asked me if I've gotten checked, and says I have to go get checked right away when I say no, I haven't gotten checked. And anybody who knows female anatomy knows female-bodied people actually do not have a prostate. So again, I'm very certain that my wife sees me exactly as a man that I am instead of seeing me as something else. But we come back to this. Is it an ethical choice? Is this an ethical choice in all these different places? You know, these are decisions you wrestle with whenever you make, like I said, even small decisions. We choose what we eat. We choose what kind of brands we use. We choose every day. We make these small choices that we might not think are ethical choices, but very often they have long consequential lines that make them, a choice for something much larger. You support one kind of a company, that means you're not supporting a different kind of company. If the people who run that company are, again, say, actively working to promote, well, in the case I think of sorry, I'm just blanking out here suddenly, but basically we had in California the anti-marriage laws that went through here. They were supported by a number of businesses, and so if you go to those businesses, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for someone to sometimes say create ads that support a particular policy or a particular politician, and those might be at odds with you. So I think basically the important part of all that is that you have to realize that ethics and values, they play a part in so many of the things we do, and if they aren't, they should. I was a park ranger for a while, and one of the best things I learned when I was in the Ranger Academy was right around the same time as we had some revelations of violence by cops that were being seen on video. And one of our teachers said, don't ever do anything that you would be ashamed to have caught on video, because we now live in a world where people have video cameras around them all the time. So don't do something that you would ever be ashamed to show up on TV. That way, it doesn't matter if you're being recorded or not. Alright, I think that's what I have to say about ethical questions, and thanks, Arthur, for inviting me to be a part of this. I hope this helps, or not helps so much, but I hope that this satisfied what you were trying to get to. Alright, thanks a lot. Bye.